Welcome, Greek U Nation, to episode number 173 of the Fraternity Foodie Podcast. I am your host, Mike Ialon, CEO of Greek University. I'm a speaker and author of the book From Letters to Leaders, Creating Impact on Your College Campus and Beyond. We call these episodes the Fraternity Foodie Podcast because there is nothing like great food to bring fraternity and sorority leaders together. Fun fact, volunteering after college was one of the best ways that I found to meet like-minded people in new cities and also grow my network. Joining Rotary allowed me to meet all of the leaders in Wilson County, Tennessee, and then that led to all kinds of new opportunities, such as completing my master's degree at Cumberland University, starting a coalition called Drug Free Wilco to address the opioid crisis in Tennessee, and it also kickstarted my work with MTSU's Center for Health and Human Services. Organizations like Rotary and Kiwanis are in cities all over the country, so go and check them out and get connected. We have another great treat for you today. Our next guest, Brian Tenclinger, is a dynamic nonprofit association executive and senior level higher education practitioner. He's the former executive director of Triangle Fraternity, noted for growing the organization by 61% and creating signature education programs for the undergraduates. He's also got 15 years of experience working in higher education programs, higher administration as a director and assistant dean with extensive experience in strategic planning, project management, talent management, organizational assessment and auditing, market trend and data analysis, fundraising, organization growth, volunteer recruitment, and risk and harm assessment. That is a mouthful. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thank you, Michael. It's good to see you again.
It's great to see you again. I'm so happy that we get to catch up. You know, this podcast is so good for that, is that I get to see people that are in the fraternity and sorority community that I don't get to see often enough. And so I'm so grateful for the podcast because it does ultimately connect me to some of the people that I would love to sit down and have a 30-minute conversation with. But oftentimes we're just so busy, we might see each other at a conference and it's like, you're going one way, I'm going the other. We've got a million things on our agenda that day, and it doesn't leave enough time for us to just sit and have a conversation. So I'm grateful for the opportunity today.
Awesome. Well, cheers. I agree.
I love it. So I want to make sure that our audience knows a little bit more about you and your background. You decided on Northern Illinois University for your undergraduate experience. So I'm wondering, why was Northern Illinois the right place for you?
Great question. I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, Downers Grove to be specific. And when I was looking at campuses, I knew that I wanted to go into education. My vision at the time was to be a teacher, high school teacher. And Northern Illinois University was about an hour away from home. So far enough that, and this is pre-internet, far enough away that, I could be away, but close enough that it was close. At the time, though, Northern Illinois University was ranked in the top 10 colleges of education in the nation. And so I had a lot of bang for my buck. It was a good opportunity to be there. And so I went solely focused on getting that education. And I'm very glad that I did. I had a great experience there and really got involved in campus life from day number 2, basically.
I love that. And you and I chose our undergraduate experiences really for the same reason. I felt at SUNY Buffalo, I was going to get a lot of bang for the buck. The return on investment was very, very high. I felt like I wasn't going to have to pay a lot out because I was a New Yorker. And so for me, it was in-state tuition. And I just felt like looking at the programs, I'm like, wow, this is an incredible education at a great price. This makes a lot of sense. So you and I are definitely aligned with that. Now, you joined Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia at Northwest Missouri State University while you were completing your master's degree in education administration. So talk to us a little bit more about Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia, why you decided to join, and how is this organization different from the other fraternities that are out there?
Yeah, so Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia is, it's a professional music fraternity for men. And I've always had a strong background in music. My dad is a lifelong musician. I grew up around musical instruments, started playing the organ when I was a little kid and eventually went up to trumpet and then French horn. So very strong musical background. And when I went to graduate school, I grew up in the Chicago suburbs, big community, and then went to Maryville, Missouri. At the time I was there, 2 stoplights in the town, 1 McDonald's. That the big news was Burger King was coming. So it was a big paradigm shift. It was a big culture shift. So I really had to rely on that campus experience. I was a residence hall director. That was my, how I earned my master's degree and paid for it that way. But a lot of my friends that I was hanging out with were involved in Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia. At that particular campus, it existed like a social fraternity. It was part of the Interfraternity Council, which is common on some campuses that it exists. So, friends join friends. People join people. I was asked, actually during a marching band rehearsal, I taught the color guard at Northwest Missouri State, and after a color guard rehearsal one day, the president of the undergraduate chapter came up and said, "Would you consider joining?" And I knew them as the singing fraternity because they all were very involved in the show choir and of course band. And I was like, well, I don't know. And so I went to a chapter meeting. I went to a couple of events. And as a grad student, I was like, this is for undergrads, but there were adults there. There were faculty members there. Part of that experience is sharing your love and passion for music with others, whether that's performing or attending an event or supporting performers. And I was like, I could totally do this. And so I affiliated and love it. Absolutely love it. If you can imagine a fraternity initiation ceremony with a room full of vocalists, it was, they sing right during. Right. Typically a couple of hymns that are sung. And then of course, as you got to know the organization, the fraternity sweetheart song and the anthem, like it just 4-part harmony, just phenomenal experience. But very, very excited to be part of that organization. The values of, promoting music and all that music can do to help a person, a community, that spoke to me. It just absolutely spoke to me. So I joined people. People joined people, and they just happened to wear Greek letters, and they happened to be very mainstream on the campus. So
I love that story, and I love the talents of all the different fraternities that are out there. You talking about Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia and the singing, during initiation, that sounds absolutely incredible. I'm sure that was just amazing. I think about AGR and their ability to cook. They have these barbecues where they invite all the brothers. And when I say they can cook, I mean, they have smokers and they have all of this meat that they're preparing for like 3 days for a barbecue competition, and they know how to cook. I look at my own brothers and I'm like, none of you can cook, none of you can sing. What can you do?
Right.
So I love that story. I think that's absolutely phenomenal. Yep. Now, you were initiated as a Renaissance brother by the Louisiana Beta chapter of Sigma Phi Epsilon, and you volunteered for SIGEP for over a decade, including as a mentor and an instructor for the SIGEP International Travel Abroad Experience, researching the residential learning community, and also serving as district governor for SIGEP. So what makes SIGEP so special to you?
So similar to Phi Mu Alpha Sinfonia, as people join people, I professionally was working in residence life and then switched over to Greek life. I became the director of Greek life at Tulane University, but wasn't affiliated. I'm Phi Mu Alpha affiliated, but wasn't part of a North American Interfraternity Conference and NIC fraternity at the time. Was volunteering with SIGEP with local chapters, and then they have regional conferences and a national, they call it conclave. So I was attending those and getting to know the movers and shakers. And as my career moved, or I moved up my career ladder, I went to a couple of different campuses to get different experiences. And I continued to stay involved with SIGEP wherever I landed. And ultimately, the executive director at the time called me and said, you need to join. You just need to join. And several of the chapters I worked with said, would you please join? And I was like, no, I respect it. But when the executive director calls and says, hey, we've got an opportunity, let's make this work. At the time, I was working at Iowa State University, and I had volunteered for several SIGEPs leading up to that, SIGEP chapters. And will never forget the conversation with the exec at the time, and when he said, "We really would like you to have, your name on our roster. We think it would be quite an honor, quite an ask." And immediately out of my mouth was, "All right, which chapter do you think that I'd have the most impact on? If I'm going to affiliate, sign my name to the role, where do you think that's going to take place? Where am I going to have the best impact?" And he immediately said, "Louisiana State University." And I had spent several years working as a mentor for that particular chapter and helping we call them chapter counselors, chapter advisor in SIGEP, who to this day is still volunteering in that role. And so I flew down to Baton Rouge and was formally initiated into the chapter, and it's my home chapter. They continue to welcome me with open arms, and I was recognized by the chancellor of the university a couple of years ago as a distinguished fraternity alumnus. And when the chancellor's office called and said, you're going to be receiving an award, I'm like, "Ma'am, I don't have a degree from Louisiana State University." She's like, "I know, but you are representing our SIGEP chapter. Your career has, et cetera, et cetera." So it was again, another people join people, but SIGEP to me has been, the public open motto is virtue, diligence, and brotherly love. And those are three things that I've always stood by, the cardinal principles of the organization. But the other part is the people. I have some of my best friends, that circle of trust, that board of directors, they are SIGEPs or volunteering with SIGEPs. There are several females who are volunteering as well. But I have been able to give back to an organization that truly believes in the value of an undergraduate experience, but more specifically, the partnership with campuses, with higher ed administration. They do not put up with the BS that happens sometimes. They step away when needed, but they also take a lot of initiative. Very, very, very proud, moment for me was being part of those inaugural things that SIGEP is known for, the signature projects that SIGEP is known for today, the residential learning community. That started at Iowa State University under my watch as assistant dean, and working with Dr. Yvonne Gensler, who actually just passed away last night, as our first faculty fellow, and then being part of an inaugural trip to Greece, where we were teaching, tracing the roots of the American college fraternity through the footprints in Greece and Athens around there. Our rituals, yours, mine, are all based on, Greek traditions and culture. So to be on the ground and to be part of that experience and then provide feedback. Hey, I think we could do it a little bit better. SIGEP was willing to go out there, and I was so fortunate to be part of that journey and continue to volunteer. So it's just been a good ride, and it's people associate me with SIGEP, and I associate myself with SIGEP, and it's just a good fit.
What an incredible story. I wish that more alumni initiations would happen across the country for people who give back to the fraternity and sorority community that might be unaffiliated in a social fraternity like you were. I wish that we would use that tool more often. I think if we did that, not only are we, showing our appreciation for somebody who has contributed to higher ed, has contributed to the Greek movement, but obviously it's made a huge difference in your life as well. And so, I just think that's an underutilized tool that we have, and we have to do that more. And I think a lot of the undergraduates are just unaware that this is a thing that could potentially happen. So it's about educating and saying, yes, we want more people to join, especially if they've gone above and beyond to help you and the fraternal movement. So I think that's fantastic. Yeah. That's really
exactly. Cool. And I think if you're going to do that alumnus initiation ceremony, that, you continue to give, continue to serve as a mentor. People give their time, their treasure, and their talent. And what undergraduates need now more than ever is the time and the talent. Cool. The treasure is nice. It's always nice to make a financial contribution if you're able to, but undergrads need the mentoring. They need those folks who've walked that journey, who've been down that path, who've made the mistakes, and can share those lessons.
Yeah, that's what undergraduates are craving right now. If we start talking about Gen Z, they want that mentoring, and fraternities and sororities have that
Yeah.
plentiful supply of mentors. So I think we're really nicely positioned here. I think with this particular generation, I hope we take advantage of those opportunities. You've also served as the executive director of Triangle Fraternity for over 9 years, and you managed a process that resulted in 60% growth for the organization. How in the world did you do that?
So two things. I leveraged my connections in higher ed. I feel like I built enough professional credibility that when I inherited Triangle Fraternity, there was no formal growth plan. There was a pretty nice business plan, but it did not include a growth plan. And we know that if you're going to build the business, you have to grow. You have to open those franchise locations. And so I was able to leverage what was happening in the United States and the fraternity experience. Triangle is a social men's fraternity for those who are studying engineering, architecture, and the hard sciences. And at the time, there was a lot of push in the United States, especially through the Department of Education, about STEM education: science, technology, engineering, math, right? So STEM education. There was and that became a mainstream term that was being used. And that's, we need to beef up and step up our STEM, our education efforts in the STEM fields and so forth. And so there was just a gold mine of an opportunity to have a STEM-based organization and promote that to campuses where I had some connections or was able to make some connections. And that started the growth plan, but also leveraging alums. You know, we were a small staff at Triangle Fraternity, and so we did not have a director of expansion. That was me. We didn't have field consultants. That was me. So training volunteers, alumni volunteers, to be part of that growth team, but also bringing in undergrads. You know, undergrads got a free trip to come to campus with me for 3 or 4 days and recruit at Berkeley or at Colorado State. And so peers recruiting peers. You know, at the time I was in my 40s, bald, and, you know, come join the fraternity. That's creepy, you know, right? But if I was able to bring a couple of undergraduates with who can talk the talk, you know, this is what it is. The other thing, Michael, that happened that I can't take credit for, at the time I was executive director and we started this growth plan, a TV sitcom debuted called The Big Bang Theory. And all of a sudden, nerdy became sexy. And nerdy became part of our daily vernacular. And that show took off like wildfire. And we ran with that. We created a marketing plan and worked very closely with a public relations company out of Ames, Iowa, to help us mainstream nerdy, right? And so this quiet, sleepy, nerdy fraternity all of a sudden was a huge hit. It was a huge hit. And thank goodness for the Big Bang Theory. We rode that wave. Tremendous growth, but leveraging a lot of partnerships and finding out where we could fill some gaps. So, and there were several gaps. You know, colleges of engineering, architecture, and hard sciences, they tend not to have teach those classes on soft skills. If you're going to become a civil engineer, you need to understand the basics of civil engineering, right? But the students want some of those life skills courses as well. Well, that's Triangle. You know, so I'm able to go in and meet with the deans of the colleges and say, here's the deal. If you will help us identify some good potential members, we've got an opportunity to work with your faculty, your staff, and create this living learning laboratory that's going to teach those critical life skills that your men and women, because there was a sister organization, you know, so need. And it just partnerships. And it worked. It was really powerful. It was a lot of work, but the data at the end of the day was 61% growth of the organization.
Just incredible. It's genius. Yeah. And I love that show, The Big Bang Theory. My kids who are in high school now absolutely love it, and it really resonates with them. So I think it's got that lasting power. And, you know, good on you to, you know, just kind of be in that position where you can draw on that reservoir of goodwill that you have with all of these campuses and help the fraternity expand through relationships. And that is ultimately what it's all about. And people might not understand that, but it really is a handshake. It's really all about relationships. And I believe these campuses, when you told them that, hey, we have an opportunity to grow on your campus because your students would identify with this organization, these campuses would welcome you in. And so, that's just amazing. That's just incredible. Love it. And you were involved in an overhaul of the fraternity's brand as well. And I actually saw some of those new things that were coming out in terms of branding. What types of things should fraternities and sororities be looking at when they consider making branding changes in organizations that are over 100 years old?
Yeah, so the key is not to lose touch of your core roots, right? There are trends, and a trend only lasts, a couple of years, and then it fades out. We see that in clothing fashions all the time, clothing trends that move in and out, music trends, etc. But the key is staying true to our roots. And with Triangle, being a non-member of the organization, I had a sense of what the roots were. I'm not privy to the ritual and initiation ceremony, but the public values. And so when it came to the branding, we worked closely with, a marketing company out of Ames, Iowa, to help with this, but listening very carefully to the constituents. We interviewed a lot of undergraduates and alums, as well as faculty members, and said, what do we need, in terms of that. At the time, a lot of fraternities were also creating the tagline. And so we were very cognizant of creating that, building better men, or, whatever the tagline was going to be. But it wasn't, the vision was never to lose sight or distort the core values of the organization. So that primary symbol, that triangle with the T in the middle, that had to be solid. Like that was not that iron, that was, could not move. And then building the image around that, and listening, so we did a listening tour and came up with a lot of things. But to me, it's again, not losing sight. So many of our organizations will quickly change things around and it just fades off. The analogy I like to use, Michael, is McDonald's. They have had the same core menu since they started: hamburgers, French fries, milkshakes, and Coca-Cola. That has never changed, right? You can always go and get a hamburger, French fries, Coca-Cola, and milkshake. But they've had some trends, and they've had the McDLT, and they've had the salad shakers, and they've had the, and some things did not stick, and they spent money and invested and didn't work. Some things come back yearly, and there's a big rush for it because, oh, this is cool, the Shamrock Shake, right? People love their Shamrock Shakes. And so it was being very careful not to distort the Triangle core values, but at the same time paying homage to that hamburger, French fries, milkshake, and Coca-Cola, what was going to be part of the organization. So we worked very, very closely to respect the founders and what their vision was. We were very fortunate to find meeting minutes from, the first 1 or 2 years of the fraternity's existence and read them very carefully at the same time we were doing the listening tour. And words and phrases just kept coming up over and over again. And that's how we landed on the image.
Good for you.
Yeah.
I love the process, and I think that's what made it stick, is that you really did listen to the alumni, and that's the difference in something that sticks versus something that's just a fad and is here for 6 months and then changes, because we've seen a lot of that too in the fraternity and sorority community.
Oh yeah,
that's the difference right there. Now, the fraternities and sororities right now have been dealing with the fallout from this pandemic. And I think right now we're looking at a loss of large scale events potentially over the next 6 months to a year. It seems like we're headed down a similar path to what we saw over the last 18 months. So what's your advice to chapters to continue their growth despite the challenges that are in front of them?
So stay true to your core values. The chapter needs to change. The undergraduate experience is changing. That's a given, and it's changing day by day on some campuses, given what's happening around the globe in this pandemic. So I think key for this is going to be the undergraduates being flexible enough to change the experience, recognizing that there will be some things that need to be done virtually. If there's an opportunity to use an app, if there's ways to track and take care of things and promote through social media, let's do that. What's not going to change is that need to belong to something greater than yourselves. Mm-hmm. We know, social scientists tell us that a lot is going to change around the globe, but that need to be part of something bigger than yourself is oh so true right now. So I think a key for our organizations is recognizing that people still want to hang out. You still need to be able to give them that hangout experience, and be able to promote that as something that's going to help them develop as a woman or man, and get them the network that they need, while at the same time having social time. So I think my advice is, the fraternity experience can't stop. You can't stop the airplane to do maintenance while it's mid-flight. And so the fraternity experience, we've taken off at the start of the academic year. And so we can't stop we can stop it, really screw up, and we can shut you down. But if we can pause a little bit and make some gradual changes in the overall experience, I think that's going to be so important. So many of our undergraduates think, oh, this is such a big change, when actually it's a little thing, such as allowing members to meet virtually or in person, and being respectful of that. Creating a dues payment system that's, using Venmo or something that can be done on your device. Making chapter meetings applicable to the student's time. Michael, you probably know this. A lot of our students are working a part-time or even full-time job just to get through college. Mm-hmm. So that Sunday night, 7 p.m. chapter meeting, that's tradition, that may not work for students in the chapter. And we need to be able to provide alternative meeting dates, times, locations in order to accommodate, and make sure that it's relevant. But that means change. Right. And you have to be able to try and tinker with it.
Yeah, change is really difficult for these organizations that are over 100 years old. And I think just in looking at what has happened over the last 18 months, the fraternities and sororities that have been flexible, that have done maybe online initiations and things like that, and have been able to think outside of the box, those are the ones that are very successful and that continue to recruit and bring in new members just as much, or if not more, than what they had before. The ones that are clinging to tradition and basically saying, no, we absolutely must do things the way that we did them 2 years ago. This is not the same world. We have to adapt. We have to.
Right, 100%. Yep.
So anyway, but it's interesting to see the different approaches that are out there. Now, you did a wonderful TEDx talk at Valparaiso University. It was called "Volunteering: The Freedom to Do Something Important," and you pointed to some really interesting things. You pointed towards the 58% decline in volunteers, which is certainly concerning for both of us. You mentioned that traditional brick and mortar campuses may fade away, which I think is another very interesting development as we talk about the fraternity and sorority experience. And you also mentioned that we need to stay true to our organization and their mission. And that's also something that you've talked about here in this interview. But, given some of the headlines that both of us are seeing about fraternities and sororities out there, the question is, are we still staying true to our mission or not?
Yes, I think we are staying true, but those organizations, those individuals, those chapters that are not, they're surfacing to the top. That's what's making the headlines, and it becomes something that we quickly grab onto. We often forget about, so think of the iceberg. Mm-hmm. You see, like 30% of the iceberg is what's exposed above the water, and then the rest of it's underneath. So anytime a major incident takes place, that's what emerges above the water, and that's what we see and focus on. Danger, danger. When really there's a lot of stuff happening beneath the water, where the support is, where the chapters are that are doing good things. And I think that's where we need to focus on. It's that middle to deep water picture of the fraternity and sorority. So yeah, I think we are staying true to our mission. We're just allowing the bad apples and the bad actors to rise to the top too much, and we're not addressing them. Some of our organizations, it appears, I don't know the full story, but it appears, they're turning a blind eye. And we just can't do that. And we can't rely on the national headquarters or the campus to do that. It has to be a peer confrontation approach. Peers have got to hold their peers accountable if they truly want some of these shenanigans to go by the wayside. There will always be hiccups. There are always going to be hiccups. It's human behavior, right? But it's how we address them and how we educate and be proactive about it is going to be so important. But yeah, things are, between now and 2050, a lot's going to change. A lot's going to change, and we have to be prepared to deal with that change in order to make it happen.
The undergraduates really struggle with that accountability piece. I mean, I talk about judicial boards and what they're supposed to look like in order to hold our members accountable when they step out of line and they're not exhibiting the values of the organization. But it's hard. I mean, you ask an undergraduate to kick out one of their, pledge brothers or pledge sisters. I mean, this is a very, very difficult thing for them to do. So I think that is the issue. Obviously, at certain points, the fraternity headquarters has to get involved, i.e. a membership review or something like that. Maybe the university has to get involved with a suspension of the chapter or something like that until we get a handle on what's going on. But I think you're right. I think ultimately we need the students themselves to hold them accountable and see those things before they become something much larger. And I'm sure in many of these instances that we read about in the newspapers, there probably were some warning signs that the chapter was aware of before the big explosion.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So now you're working as area director manager, global membership and education for Kiwanis. Groups such as Rotary and Kiwanis have really struggled to gain more members, despite the fact that they're doing amazing work in the communities. I know because I'm one of the people that's carrying out that work. So why are these organizations struggling so much? And what are you doing to turn that around?
It's funny when you, especially in my work with Kiwanis, the average age of a Kiwanian in the United States is 62 years old. And so we have the data that shows that. And what we find is that generation is very resistant to change. And for a couple of reasons. I may not be around much longer, so why would I put the time and effort into it? Things are working fine. Let's just continue to move. And there's fear of the unknown. When you are average age 62 and you've got an established club in a community and you always have the pancake breakfast every Labor Day weekend and there's money coming in and we can then turn around and write a scholarship check, that's great. But we're serving children. Kiwanis's mission is to serve children, and the needs of children are changing every single day. I think that what my team is trying to do is make sure that our leaders in the Kiwanis family are aware of what's happening in their communities. We're asking them to pause their operations and reinvest in their communities and have some focus group conversations, especially anyone that's working with children. So educators, social services people, parent-teacher associations, have those conversations and start listening for those common threads that you may hear. What are the needs, so forth and so on. Take some notes, and if what you're offering in terms of service, as a club is not matching the current needs of the community, there's a huge disconnect. Think of a product being sold. If your product is not selling, it's because there's no demand from the customers. We stop going to a particular store because the product hasn't changed, or we just don't like it anymore, or whatever the situation is, and it's not going to be relevant. And so we are trying to get that message out that these are franchise locations. I'm currently sitting at the international headquarters in Indianapolis having this conversation with you, but I've got franchise locations all around the globe that we don't live in the community, they do. So we need to pause and reassess, every organization, does. And take a look. I think the key for us is that parent-teacher association. They probably were the first to make some major changes in March of 2020 when this global pandemic hit, because they recognized, these are my children, my students that are in the schools. We've got to make some changes and adjust and continue to do that. And so we need to listen to them. We need to listen to others that have been out there and be willing to make the adjustment. And you have support. One of the keys that we try and stress was, a club in a community, a chapter on a campus, they have support. They often just forget about the volunteers, the faculty, the staff, the police, whoever can help with that change management. They often think they're carrying all the burden on their shoulders, and it's not them. It's a we together.
It's so fascinating. These civic clubs have so much in common with fraternities and sororities, and more than we talk about it. There's so many similarities there.
Yeah.
So making sure that you're still relevant, right? We've been talking about this for decades.
Yeah.
So I think that's, a lot of parallels there for sure. One of the things I really like about your approach is that you have this personal board of directors, and
Mhm.
almost all of those who have a seat at Brian's personal board of directors are your SIGEP brothers, both undergraduates and also alumni. So why is it important for somebody to have a personal board of directors?
For me, it's you can't go at it alone. I may think I know. I may think I know. You know, and it's okay to ask. It's okay to seek guidance and counsel and figure out, what is so important to you.
Mhm.
Um, if you knew anything about Delphi in Greece, there was an oracle, the famous oracle in Delphi. And before you could, people would travel, hundreds of miles to Delphi, Greece, and ask a question of the oracle to hopefully get some guidance and so forth. But before you could enter that temple and talk to the priests who would then relay your question to the oracle, there was a phrase written above the entrance to the temple that said, know thyself. You had to know thyself in order to make sure that you were genuinely, authentically, who you are. And I think living your life with authenticity is so important. And that includes admitting when you need advice, guidance, and counsel. It means knowing when I'm not authentically genuine. I screwed up, and I should not have done that, and learning from it. So I think having that board of directors is so important. Many people think board of directors, they're going to tell you how to run your life. No, a personal board of directors is there to answer your questions and make sure that you are truly knowing thyself, as you go day to day through life, which is important for me. We often call them best friends, which they are, but these are people who I love and trust dearly. And if one of them were to call me and say, what the heck? What is up with that post you put on Facebook? Or how come you haven't called me in 3 weeks? Or, I know that they are genuine. They're coming at it from a genuine care and love approach, but also congratulating us. Going back to your comment about undergraduates holding each other accountable, we have these standards boards, judicial boards, and chapters, and many of those chapters think it's only to deal with the consequential situations, when part of it is also acknowledging the good. We have standards in our sororities and fraternities, and those include academic and volunteer and service, you name it. That standards board should be doing the shout outs and recognition and sharing all that, because you, Michael, have upheld the standards of your Sigma Pi chapter. And we want to say congratulations, brother of the week, whatever. Here's a Snickers bar, or whatever's going to be something important for you. But, those shout outs are so important in order to keep people moving.
That's how we keep the focus on the values of our organization, is by talking about that every single week and showing how our brothers and sisters exemplified those values that week. And I think if we continue to do that, instead of promoting wrong behavior, i.e. the person who got the drunkest this week, let's focus on the values of the organization, and let's focus on ways that we've seen our brothers and sisters exemplify those values. And let's talk about that every week. That's how you keep the focus where it needs to be. And I love this idea of board of directors. I mean, boy, I think about all the giants before me, guys like Dave Westall and guys like Pete Smith-Eisler and on and on and on, people that I've relied on for advice, because Lord knows I've made a lot of mistakes over the years. I mean, if I'm going to sit here and say I haven't made mistakes, I wouldn't be truthful. The fact is I have made mistakes.
Yeah.
So many. And I want to normalize that for the college students, because I don't want them to be afraid of making mistakes, but I've learned from them.
Yep.
And I've also created that board of directors that you talk about, that personal board of directors, with a very diverse group of people that help me to see my blind spots. I've also, as I've gotten older, I've noticed that I have these blind spots that I can't see. But if I have this diverse group of people around me, they can point those out to me. And I rely on that so much. You have no idea. So I think those are great tips for anybody who's listening. I think this is great. Now, we love good food here at Fraternity Foodie, and I know that you love culinary experiences and
Yep.
wine. So I am
Yep.
talking to the right guy right now, because
Yep.
you and I can bond over food like nobody's business.
Yep.
So what is your favorite restaurant in Indianapolis?
So no pause in the answer. Rooster's Kitchen. It's a made from scratch restaurant. So the owner, Ross, who's a fraternity man himself, Sigma Alpha Epsilon and former IFC president, he has taken some of his Jewish grandmother's recipes and put a twist on them, and has built a comfortable place. But yeah, if you're looking to have a great pint or any of a beverage, homemade soda, and an amazing meal, and you're willing to not count calories, Rooster's Kitchen is where you want to be. It's just delicious, delicious.
The Israeli in me is very happy that you went in that direction, and you and I would have a fantastic meal there. So I'm looking forward to seeing you in Indianapolis, and we'll meet up for some food and some drinks over there.
Yes.
That would be a lot of fun. All right.
Yes.
So if our listeners, if they have questions for you, or maybe they just want to follow you on social media and get to know you a little bit better, where should they go to connect with you?
Yeah, so probably I have an Instagram page, a Facebook page, and a LinkedIn page. And probably the easiest thing is just search my last name. It's very unique. There are only 43 Tenklingers in the world, actually. Legit, 43 people with that last name. And so it's very easy just to do a LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram search for Tenclinger, and you'll be able to find me, and would love to have a conversation, would love to do some idea swapping. But yeah, it's probably the easiest way to do it.
I love it. Brian, this has been so much fun. I'm so happy that we got to spend some time together this morning. I really appreciate you. I appreciate everything that you've done for the fraternity and sorority community. And what can I say? I hope that we're going to get some food in Indianapolis sometime real soon.
I hope so too. Thank you for all you're doing, Michael. Appreciate you.
Doing the best that I can. So I appreciate you. For all the undergraduates and alumni and listeners for the Fraternity Foodie podcast, we hope that you've enjoyed this session with Brian. I hope that you like it. I hope that you share it on social media with other fraternity and sorority members that you think would get some benefit from hearing Brian's words. And we hope to see you on another episode of Fraternity Foodie. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.